And we're trying to time it to where on Easter Sunday we get to the resurrection. Okay, so don't read ahead. No, you can read ahead. It's okay. You can read as much as you want. But this is a section that covers material that other Gospels have. So it gives us a chance to look at what John does different with the material. And that tells us some things about what he wants to do for his original audience. Because they had Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And now they have the Gospel of John. John chapter 18, verse 1. Let's read together. It says here, when he'd finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side there was an olive grove, and he and his disciples went into it. Now, he's the only one that mentions the Kidron Valley. There's a creek that runs through the Kidron Valley. And there's something unique about this creek. You know, during the Passover, when they slaughtered thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of lambs, and they took those bowls, and they passed it in a brigade line, and they would throw it up against the altar. You ever wonder where that blood went? Well, there was a drain. There was a drain in the temple compound, and it drained into the Kidron Creek. That blood was probably still there. That creek was probably still red when they crossed the Kidron Valley. And John remembers that. He remembers what it was like to step across that creek that was not clear anymore. At any rate, it says here, it says, now Judas, who had betrayed him, knew this place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the grove, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, who is it you want? The most important thing that we're missing here is the prayer to let this cup pass from him. Do you remember as you read that in the other Gospels how tearing that is to your heart when you know that Jesus understood what he was going to have to go through for you and I, and he says, according to Luke, that he shed blood. We don't have it in John. No mention of that. No mention at all of the anguish Jesus was going through about what he was going to have to face. It does say he knows what he's going to have to face. He knew what was happening. And in John, he just goes out and he asks these guys. He doesn't wait for Judas to come and give him a kiss. That's not in this text either. And this is the way John remembers it. Jesus went out to face them. And he says, who is it you want? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. I am he, Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. What you have here is almost a comical picture. This is not what this group was expecting. As they had their torches, their weapons, as they went out to find Jesus, to hunt him down, to have Jesus come out to them and say, who are you looking for? Well, Jesus of Nazareth. Here I am. And they stumbled over themselves and fell down. They weren't expecting this at all. They were expecting they were going to have to ferret him out of this garden. They were going to have to give chase until they caught him. And when they caught as many as they could, then they were going to have Judas identify who he was. But that's not the way it happened. Jesus went out and said, who are you looking for? Jesus of Nazareth. And then he uses a very interesting, well, it's a pronoun. I am He. How many I ams have we found in the book of John? I am the way, the truth, the life. I am the good shepherd. I am the gate. I am. Each one of them making a reference to the name that God gave himself. I am. I am the one. And they fell over each other as they tried to back up. He says here, again he asked them, who is it you want? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. He said, I told you that I am he. Jesus answered, if you're looking for me, then let these men go. This happened so that the words he had spoken will be fulfilled. I have not lost one of those you gave me. He says, all right, you just want me, and let these guys go. And it appears that they were willing to do that. But somebody had a different idea. It says here in verse 10, then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malcus. Jesus commanded Peter, put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? We've talked about this scene before. Matter of fact, if you look on the order of worship here, what you're going to see is an ear. It's hard to find an ear that you want to put on there. The ones that I picked out, Lynn said, no, I don't put that on there. So we got this kind of drawing of an ear. You know? We tried about swords, but you know what? All the swords that you find pictures of are pretty cool swords. What kind of sword do you think Peter the fisherman had? It probably looked like a big knife. It wasn't much of a sword as swords go. The Romans weren't really fond of letting everybody have swords, right? But Peter had a sword, and we know this from another text where Jesus is talking about, you know, when you go out, I told you not to take purses and not to take swords. He said, but now you need to. And somebody whips out a couple swords, and we got a couple swords, and you're wondering where in the world they got these things. But Peter had one. Peter had one. And Peter had the chance to get away, didn't he? Who gave him that chance? Jesus. If you want me, let these guys go. But Peter wasn't willing to go. Peter came after somebody with a sword. And we've talked about the logistics of cutting off somebody's ear before, haven't we? When we did Mark. I mean, it's hard to come up and cut off somebody's ear. What you're doing is going for his head. And the person is ducking. And what you end up with is the ear. And in this case, the right ear. Right? Peter was trying to cut this guy's head off. Here's the interesting thing that John tells us. That it was Peter. Do you know the other three Gospels? We don't know it's Peter. It just says one of the disciples. Now, those were written a lot closer to the time that this incident actually happened. But maybe John's audience had a view of Peter that wasn't very good. Or maybe enough time had passed. Or maybe Peter had passed. And it was okay to say, that was Peter. That was Simon Peter. Jesus, he opened the door for everybody to leave, and Simon came out swinging with a rusty old sword. And we know what? We know who he swung at. The guy had a name. His name was Malcus. We know he was the servant of the high priest. Probably one that didn't have a sword. Why did Peter swing at him?